Hash inside a medieval alchemist's lab. Bedtime history. Part 1. Hey guys, tonight we are unlocking a door that was meant to stay closed. The storm is raging outside, but inside this tower, a fire is burning that hasn't gone out in weeks. We are stepping into the alchemist's laboratory. We are going to witness the search for the impossible. This is a story about mystery, glowing glass, and the sound of the furnace. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, watch the liquid bubble, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are climbing. The stone stairs wind upward in the darkness, each step worn smooth by centuries of footfalls. Your hand trails along the wall, and the stone is cold, so cold it seems to pull the warmth from your fingers. Above you, there is a light, a faint, orange glow that flickers and dances, casting moving shadows down the stairwell. You cannot see who or what is making that light. You only know that it is waiting. Each step the air changes. It becomes thicker, heavier. You smell it first, a complex tapestry of scents that assault your senses in ways you do not have words for. There is sulfur, yes, sharp and acrid, the smell of a blacksmith's forge mixed with something far older and far stranger. There is charcoal, the deep, almost sweet smell of wood burned down to its essence. There is copper and rust, and something metallic that catches in the back of your throat. But beneath all of this, there is another smell. Something you cannot identify. Something that might be earth, or might be decay, or might be something in between. The smell of secrets kept in glass bottles for decades. The smell of experiments that were never meant to see daylight. The spiral staircase finally ends. Before you is a door. It is made of heavy oak, banded with iron. The wood is stained with substances of unknown origin, dark reddish streaks, yellowish burns, and pale crystalline deposits that sparkle faintly in the flickering light. The door stands slightly ajar, and the light from within spills out across the stone floor like liquid gold. You push. The door swings inward on hinges that creak with age and hesitation, and then you step through. The room takes your breath away. It is round. You realize immediately that you are inside a tower chamber, perhaps 30 feet across, with walls that curve away into shadows. The ceiling is impossibly high, disappearing into darkness, and you realize it must be the peak of the tower itself. Small, arched windows are cut into the walls, and through them you can see the fury of the night. Rain lashes against the glass with an almost rhythmic violence. Slash, slash, slash. The wind howls, a deep, mournful sound that seems to come from the very earth itself. Lightning flickers periodically, illuminating the room in stark, harsh bursts of white light, then plunging it back into the dancing orange glow of the furnace. But the rain and the storm are outside. Here, inside this circular chamber, there is a different world entirely. Every surface is covered with glass. The tables that line the walls are crammed with vessels of every conceivable shape and size. Long-necked flasks stand next to squat, bulbous containers. Tubes of glass, some as thin as your finger, others as thick as your wrist, twist and curve in patterns that seem to follow no logic. Some are clear. Others are tinted with colors, pale greens, deep ambers, and mysterious purples that seem to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The glass catches the firelight and throws it back in dancing patterns across the walls and ceiling. It is like being inside a cathedral of flame. On one table, you see what appears to be an entire miniature city of glass. Towers and turrets made from carefully blown glass vessels stand in neat rows, connected by glass tubes that bend at impossible angles. These are not decorations. Every piece has a purpose, though you cannot imagine what that purpose might be. Within these vessels, traces of substances remain, dried residues in various colors, crystalline deposits, and stains that suggest liquids once flowed through these passages. The more you look, the more you understand that this is a map of something, a diagram written not in ink, but in glass and chemistry. The candlelight, and it is candlelight, you realize, though the candles must be large and numerous to cast such a glow, flickers across everything, making it all seem to breathe and move. The shadows shift and dance. The glass seems to pulse with its own inner light. And then there is the furnace. It dominates the center of the room. The Athanor stands perhaps 7 feet tall, a towering construction of brick and iron that rises from the floor like a small oven or kiln. It is circular in design, with a large opening at the base, the firebox, where you can see the orange glow of flames dancing within. The surface of the brick is stained with the accumulation of decades, perhaps centuries. Dark stains suggest explosions or spills of unknown substances. Some patches of brick are discolored, burned perhaps by heat more intense than brick should be able to withstand. Others show a crystalline coating, the result of mineral deposits being slowly cooked into the brick itself. At the top of the furnace, there is an opening. A chimney rises from it, a tall iron pipe that ascends through the ceiling and presumably continues up and out through the peak of the tower. As you watch, you can hear the whisper of air being drawn up through that chimney. It is not a loud sound, but rather a gentle susurration, a breathing sound, the sound of the furnace pulling air through itself, drawing oxygen down through the flames in the firebox, and sending the smoke and vapors up and out into the night. The breath of the furnace, in and out, in and out. It has been breathing for weeks, you were told, weeks without stopping. The fire within has never gone cold. You move closer. The heat is intense, even from several feet away. Your face warms immediately. The air becomes dry against your skin. You can feel the furnace, truly feel it, not just see it or hear it. It is a living thing in this tower, a heart, a sun, a presence that makes itself known through warmth and light, and the constant, subtle sound of flames consuming wood and the heat building brick to the point where the very material itself begins to transform. Looking into the firebox, you can see the fire itself. It is not the violent, leaping fire of a common hearth. This is a different kind of flame. It is steady and slow-burning, a deep orange red that suggests tremendous heat despite the lack of wild motion. The wood inside has been reduced to massive charcoal chunks that glow from within, from the core itself, as if they contain their own inner light. The heat coming from these coals is remarkable, steady, and even. Around the base of the furnace, on the floor, there are several ash pits. These are where the ashes from the furnace are allowed to fall and collect. You can see the layering in these ash deposits, light grey layers alternating with darker grey layers, each one telling the story of a fire that burned at a certain temperature on a certain day, weeks or months ago. The ash itself is fine, like powder, and you wonder if any of this ash has significance. Does the alchemist save it, use it in his experiments? You look more closely and notice small brass scoops hung on hooks nearby. Yes, the ash is collected, carefully, deliberately. The furnace breathes. In, out, in, out. The gentle sound of the air being drawn through the coals, of the flames consuming the wood, of the heat being sustained at precisely the right temperature. This is the sound of the alchemist's work. This is the sound of transformation. Now, moving your eyes away from the furnace and around the room, you begin to notice the true complexity of what is happening here. The tables are not merely scattered with glass. They are organized, deliberately arranged. There is a pattern to it all, though the pattern is one that requires understanding alchemy to fully comprehend. Against one curved wall of the tower, there is a table that holds what appears to be the central laboratory of the operation. Here, the glassware is arranged in a specific sequence, and it is here that you see, for the first time, the true mastery of the glassblow's craft. The centerpiece is an alembic. This vessel is extraordinary. It is made from clear glass, blown so thin that you can almost see through it, yet thick enough that you know it will withstand heat and pressure. The shape is iconic, almost organic. The bottom is a rounded, bulbous sphere, large enough to hold several quarts of liquid. The top narrows gradually into a neck, which then flares slightly outward before narrowing again into a long, graceful spout that curves downward and outward, extending away from the body of the vessel at an angle. This curved spout is crucial. When liquids boil inside the sphere and vaporize, the vapors rise into the neck, where they begin to cool slightly. The vapors travel up and along the curved spout, continuing to cool, and the cooler they become, the more they condense. By the time they reach the end of the spout, they have condensed back into liquid form. This liquid then drips from the tip of the spout into a collection vessel below. What enters that collection vessel is not the same as what was boiled. It is refined, concentrated, transformed. This is distillation, and the alembic is the tool that makes it possible. Beside the alembic, you see other vessels. A retort is nearby. This is similar to an alembic, but with a more compact design, almost like a gourd or a calabash, with the spout built as an integral part of the vessel itself rather than as a separate attachment. The advantage of a retort is that it can be sealed more completely, allowing for the pressure inside to build, creating conditions that cannot be achieved in an open alembic. Then there is the cucurbit. This is a simple, almost crude-looking vessel, a rounded, bulbous container with a wide mouth and short neck. When filled with liquid and covered, a cucurbit serves a specific purpose in the alchemical process. It is often the first step in distillation, where a raw liquid is heated gently in a cucurbit, and the vapors rise into a connected alembic or retort above it. All of this glass is beautiful. Each vessel has clearly been hand-blown by a master craftsman. You can see the slight variations in thickness where the craftsman's skill shows through. Some sections of glass are thicker, indicating where extra care was taken to reinforce a weak point. Other sections are so thin they seem almost fragile. The glass itself is not perfectly clear. There are tiny bubbles trapped within it, and these catch the firelight, making each vessel sparkle individually, like a small constellation of stars. But what strikes you most profoundly is the condensation. As you watch, you see liquid forming on the inside of some of the glass vessels. This is water that has condensed from the moisture in the air, drawn inside by the cooling effect of the furnace pulling air through the room, and then that air moving through equipment that sits at various temperatures. But more than that, you see what appears to be the residue of previous experiments. Inside some of the tubes and vessels, you can see crystals forming. These are deposits left behind by countless distillations, by countless attempts to extract, to refine, to transform. And you hear it. Drip. A single drop of condensed liquid falls from the tip of a tube that curves downward into the darkness. Drip. Another drop follows. Drip, drip, drip. The rhythm is irregular, almost hypnotic. Sometimes there are several drops in quick succession, sometimes a long pause before the next one falls. But the sound is constant, present, a metronome of the alchemist's work. Drip, 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 the sound of transformation, one drop at a time. You move deeper into the laboratory, drawn by this sound. Your eyes are adjusting now to the light, and you can see more detail. On another table, there is a collection of vessels that hold various liquids and powders. These must be the raw materials, the starting point for the work. This table is where the magic begins, or perhaps it is where the science begins. The distinction between the two, here in this tower, seems impossibly blurred. The first thing you notice is a small glass jar filled with a brilliant red powder. The color is so vivid that it seems almost unnatural. It catches your eye immediately. This is cinnabar. The name comes to you from some half-remembered study of alchemical texts, perhaps something you read years ago and forgot. But now, seeing it, the name surfaces in your mind. Cinnabar, mercuric sulfide, a mineral that is rare and valuable, found only in specific places in the world. This powder is the color of blood, the color of transformation. Next to the cinnabar, There is a glass bottle containing a green liquid. The color is not the green of nature, not the green of grass or leaves. This is an acidic green, a vicious green, a green that warns of danger and pain. This is vitriol, oil of vitriol, sulfuric acid. You know instinctively that this substance is dangerous, that even breathing the fumes above it could damage your lungs. You take a step back, away from it. This is not something to approach casually. But the third substance draws you forward again. It is a glass jar, sealed carefully with a cork stopper, and inside it is a liquid metal. It moves. Even as you look at it, it moves. The surface ripples, not from vibration, but from some internal quality of the substance itself. It is mercury, quicksilver, the liquid metal that seems alive, that moves with an intelligence of its own, that cannot be grasped or held because it will simply flow between your fingers. You watch it move inside the sealed jar. It is mesmerizing. The mercury pools in the bottom of the jar, but the surface is never still. It seems to breathe. Tiny droplets separate and float above the main mass, then rejoin it. The mercury seems to know the boundaries of its container and respects them, yet it seems to strain against them, as if eager to escape and continue its eternal motion. These three substances, you understand somehow, are connected. Cinnabar is sulfide of mercury. Vitriol is a powerful acid. Mercury is the liquid metal itself. Together, they form the beginning of an alchemical process. But what is the end? What is the goal? Is the alchemist trying to separate the mercury from the cinnabar? Is he trying to create something new by combining these elements in the presence of heat and the acidic vapor? These questions hang in the air as you continue your exploration of the laboratory. Further along the table, there are other substances. You see a dark powder that glimmers with flecks of gold when the light catches it. This might be gold itself, ground to powder, or it might be something else entirely. Iron sulfide, perhaps, which has a metallic luster that can fool the untrained eye. There is a crystalline substance that is clear and colorless, and you recall that this might be salt of some kind. Alchemists use salt in their work constantly. Common salt, but also exotic salts derived from the residues of other experiments. There is a small clay part that contains what appears to be sulfur. The smell confirms it. Your nose catches the distinctive, acrid scent, and you look away, your eyes slightly watering. And then, in the center of all these substances, you see a heavy iron mortar and pestle. The mortar is ancient. Its walls are thick and slightly irregular, suggesting that it was cast by hand, perhaps centuries ago. The surface is pitted and stained. There are dark streaks that suggest oxidation, burns that suggest sparks from a flame, and strange discolorations that hint at the countless substances that have been ground into this vessel over decades or centuries. The pestle is equally heavy, a blunt instrument of iron, its end slightly rounded from thousands of grinding motions. Next to this mortar, on the table surface itself, there are traces of what has been ground before. Fine dusts of various colors, some red, some yellow, some black, outline the area. The table is a map of previous work. This is where the physical transformation begins, not through heat or flame or distillation, but through the simple, brutal act of grinding, breaking down, pulverizing, taking solid forms and reducing them to powder, to dust, to the finest particles imaginable. It is an essential step. The smaller the particles, the more surface area is exposed, the more readily they will react with heat, with moisture, with acids, with other substances. The grinding is not merely mechanical. It is a form of alchemy in itself. You move toward the mortar. Your hand reaches out, and you can almost feel the weight of it. The iron is cool to the touch, despite being in a warm room heated by a furnace that has burned for weeks. Iron holds the cold better than other substances. It maintains its temperature. On the table beside the mortar, you see a piece of ore. This is raw mineral, unprocessed. It is dark and heavy, studded with crystals of various colors. Quartz, perhaps, streaked with traces of copper or other metals. This is what will be ground. This is what will be transformed. You imagine the process. The ore is placed in the mortar. The pestle is raised. And then the work begins. It is rhythmic work, physical work, the kind of work that requires patience and strength in equal measure. Clink. The pestle strikes the ore. Clink. Again, the iron on stone, producing a sound like a bell ringing, but duller, less pure, a sound that is more felt than heard. Clink, clink, clink. The rhythm builds. The wrist rotates, grinding the pestle against the ore in circular motions, crushing it, breaking it down. Fragments of stone splinter and shatter. Dust rises. The dust is fine and grey, but as you watch, you see that it is not uniform. Mixed into the grey are flecks of red, streaks of green, hints of yellow. The ore is not pure. It is a mixture, a compound of many minerals bound together. And as it is ground, these different elements begin to separate, their different densities and shapes causing them to migrate to different parts of the mortar. Clink, clink, clink. The sound continues. It is almost musical in its own way, a metallic music, a music of transformation and breakdown. The rhythm seems to match the pulse of the furnace in the center of the room. Both have their own rhythm, yet somehow they harmonize. The clink of the pestle and the whisper of the furnace, the crackle of the coals, the subtle roar of the flames. The dust rises thicker now. It catches the light of the candles, and you can see it swirling in the air, illuminated from below, creating an almost ethereal effect. This dust is dangerous to breathe. You know this instinctively. The particle size is so small that if inhaled it would lodge deep in the lungs, and over time it would accumulate, would damage tissue, would cause the slow poisoning of the body. The alchemist, by grinding these ores daily, weekly, yearly, is slowly poisoning himself. His lungs are filling with the very dust of the substances he seeks to transform. Is this a sacrifice? Is this part of the alchemy? Does the work require a price, paid in the slow degradation of the body that performs it? These dark thoughts linger as you watch the grinding continue. Clink, clink, clink. The ore is becoming finer and finer. Now it is mostly dust. The larger fragments have been broken down. You can see where the mortar is becoming fuller, the dust beginning to accumulate in the bottom, building up as the grinding continues. And then, after what feels like both an instant and an eternity, the sound changes. The clink becomes softer, less pronounced. The pestle is no longer striking hard fragments of ore. It is grinding powder against the iron surface of the mortar. The sound becomes almost a whisper, a grinding whisper, as the fine powder is crushed further, becoming even finer still. Some materials require this double grinding, perhaps triple grinding, until they reach a consistency fine enough for the alchemist's purpose. Eventually, the grinding stops. The mortar is full of dust. The color is complex, predominantly gray, but threaded through with the colors of the various minerals contained within the ore. It is no longer ore. It is powder. It is potential. It is a substance that can now be used in the next step of the process. You step back from the table, and your eye is drawn once more to the central table, where the glass vessels stand in their careful arrangement. It is time for the experiment to begin. This is where the powder will be used. This is where the transformation will truly commence. You watch as the alchemist. You realize now that there is an alchemist present in this room, though you have not consciously registered his presence until this moment, moves to the table. He is an elderly man, or perhaps simply a man worn by years of work in this tower. His hair is grey, his face lined, but his eyes are bright and alert. He moves with the precise, careful motions of someone who has done this same work thousands of times. He takes a measure of the ground ore and places it carefully into the cucurbit. The bulbous vessel sits on the table, waiting. He uses a small horn spoon to transfer the powder, scooping it from the mortar and depositing it into the mouth of the cucurbit. His movements are gentle, deliberate. No dust is wasted. Every particle is carefully controlled. Now, from one of the other containers on the table, he retrieves a liquid. This is a clear liquid, pale golden in color. Water. No, you realize this is something else. The way it moves in its container is different from water. It is slightly more viscous, clinging to the glass slightly more. This is an oil, a liquid derived from some substance, perhaps from the distillation of plant matter, perhaps from minerals that have been dissolved and then carefully evaporated and collected. He pours this liquid carefully over the powder in the cucurbit. The liquid soaks into the powder immediately, the porous dust absorbing it greedily. The mixture begins to change color almost immediately. The gray powder takes on a darker hue, becoming almost greenish as the liquid is absorbed. A chemical reaction is beginning even before heat is applied. You can smell it. The scent in the air changes. New odors emerge, not unpleasant, but strange, complex, hinting at transformations happening at a molecular level, at bonds being broken and reformed. Now, the alchemist reaches for another piece of equipment. This is a long glass tube, bent at an angle, with a wider bore at one end. This will serve as the connecting tube between the cucurbit and another vessel, a receiving vessel where the vapors will condense. He carefully inserts one end of this tube into the mouth of the cucurbit, angling it so that it will allow vapors to rise from the heated mixture, but will not allow liquid to flow back down into the cucurbit. This is crucial. The liquid that condenses in the receiving vessel must not flow backward. Now, the receiving vessel is positioned. This is a simple, rounded glass jar, designed to catch the condensed liquid that will drip from the end of the connecting tube. A length of glass tubing extends from the tube into this receiving vessel, ensuring that the condensed liquid will flow into the bottom of the vessel rather than splashing on its exterior. Next comes the sealing. The alchemist reaches for small pieces of clay, the material that will seal the joints where glass meets glass. This is called lute, you remember. It is a special clay designed to withstand heat, to seal vessels against the escape of vapor, to create an airtight junction between pieces of glass. He rolls a small amount of the lute between his palms, warming it, making it more plastic and workable. Then, very carefully, he applies it around the junction where the curved tube enters the mouth of the cucurbit. His fingers work it into the gap, pressing it firmly, ensuring a complete seal. No vapor must escape from this joint. The reaction inside the cucurbit must be contained, directed upward through the curved tube, driven toward the receiving vessel by the building heat and the pressure of the vapors. He repeats this process for each joint. Each connection is sealed with the same careful attention. This is not work that can be rushed. A single imperfect seal could cause the entire experiment to fail. Vapors could escape into the room, potentially dangerous vapors that should be collected and condensed, or the pressure could build in an uncontrolled way, potentially causing the vessel to crack or shatter from the stress. The sealing takes time. The alchemist's hands are steady, his focus complete. He does not rush. He does not allow his attention to waver. This is the foundation of everything that follows. Get the sealing right, and the experiment has a chance of success. Fail in the sealing, and all the work, the grinding of the ore, the preparation of the materials, comes to nothing. Finally, the sealing is complete. The glass vessels and tubes form a sealed system. Nothing can escape except through the intended pathway, the vapors rising from the heated cucurbit, traveling through the tube, and then condensing in the receiving vessel. Now, the entire apparatus is positioned on a sand bath. This is a critical element of alchemical work. The sand bath is not a direct heat source. Instead, a large, shallow container is filled with sand, and then the vessels are nestled into this sand. The sand, when heated, distributes the heat evenly and slowly. It acts as a buffer, preventing the direct flames of the furnace from contact with the delicate glass vessels. If the glass were to be heated too quickly, if it were exposed to the intense direct heat of the furnace, it could crack or shatter. The sand bath ensures that the heat builds gradually, that it is distributed evenly, that the glass never experiences a thermal shock that might cause failure. The sand bath itself is positioned at a medium distance from the furnace. Not too close, the heat would be too intense. Not too far, the reaction would never reach completion. There is a precise distance, a perfect location, where the heat is just right. The alchemist knows this distance. He has learned it through years of experience, through successful experiments and failed ones, through the accumulation of knowledge about how materials behave and how they react. The sand bath is being heated now. Already, the furnace is doing its work. The radiant heat from the burning coals is beginning to warm the sand, and the sand, in turn, is beginning to warm the vessels nestled within it. The process is slow at first. Nothing visible happens. The liquid in the cucurbit remains still, undisturbed. But inside the mixture, at the molecular level, things are beginning to happen. The heat is providing energy. The molecules of the liquid and the powder are beginning to vibrate faster. The vibrations increase the frequency of collisions between molecules. These collisions cause reactions. Bonds that have held certain atoms together are broken. New bonds form. Atoms and molecules recombine in new configurations. And slowly, inevitably, the mixture begins to heat. Time passes. The rain continues to lash against the windows. The wind continues to howl around the tower. The furnace breathes its steady breath, pulling air through the coals, maintaining the temperature that will drive the entire experiment. And then it begins. In the bottom of the cucurbit, you can see the liquid beginning to move. It is subtle at first, just a slight trembling on the surface. But then, as the heat builds, the trembling becomes more pronounced. The liquid is warming. The temperature is rising. And then the first bubble. It forms at the bottom of the vessel, a small sphere of vapor, no larger than a grain of rice. It clings to the inner surface of the glass, held there by the surface tension of the liquid and the pressure of its own internal gas. For a moment, it seems as though it will simply sit there, a single bubble in an endless sea of liquid. Then it breaks free. The bubble rises, slowly at first, leaving a thin trail of smaller bubbles in its wake. As it rises, it expands, pushing against the pressure of the liquid above it, growing larger, gathering more vapor as it ascends. And as it nears the surface of the liquid, it suddenly bursts. The effect is instantaneous. The vapor within the bubble escapes into the gas space above the liquid, the headspace of the vessel. This vapor mixes with the air already there, and the concentration of the gaseous substance increases. One bubble is inconsequential, but one bubble is followed by another. Bubble. Another bubble forms. This one is slightly larger, slightly faster to form. Bubble, bubble. Now 2 bubbles rise together, and behind them more form. The rate of formation increases as the temperature rises further. The heated liquid is now producing vapor at an accelerating rate. The alchemist watches. He is patient. He does not try to force the reaction. He simply allows it to proceed at its own pace, driven by the gentle, even heat of the sand bath. The bubbles become more frequent. Now they rise in a stream, a constant procession of spheres of vapor ascending through the liquid, gathering and rising, bursting at the surface in a steady, rhythmic pulse. Babble, 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 babble. The sound is soft, a gentle susurration, like the whisper of rain on leaves. But to the ears of someone who understands, who has been trained to listen to the voice of the experiment, it is a language. It is telling the story of what is happening inside the sealed vessel. The rate of bubbling, the intensity, the consistency. All of these things communicate information about the temperature, about the progress of the reaction, about whether everything is proceeding as planned. And then the vapor rises through the glass tube. The change is obvious. Inside the connecting tube, you can now see a column of vapor rising. It is not visible as a distinct form. It is not smoke or steam in the conventional sense. Rather, it is a subtle disturbance in the air, a shimmer in the glass, a slight cloudiness that indicates the presence of vapor moving through the space. As this vapor rises, it begins to cool. The glass surrounding it is exposed to the cooler air of the tower, and the heat begins to dissipate. The vapor loses energy. The molecules slow down, and as they slow, they can no longer resist the attraction between them. They begin to clump together, to condense, to transform from the gaseous state back into the liquid state. And then it happens. A drop of condensed liquid forms at the end of the tube, where it enters the receiving vessel. The drop is small, almost invisible, but it is there. It swells, gathering the continuing stream of condensed vapor, growing larger and larger as more vapor condenses, as more liquid accumulates at this single point. And then it falls. Drip. The sound is tiny, almost inaudible, but it is there. A single drop of transformed liquid falling from the glass tube into the receiving vessel below. Drip. Another drop follows. This one falls more quickly, as if eager to join its predecessor. Drip, drip. The rhythm continues. The bubbling in the cucurbit drives more vapor upward. The vapor condenses in the tube and the receiving vessel, and the condensed liquid falls, drop by drop, into the receiver. Drip, 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 drip. The rhythm becomes steady now. Not perfectly regular. No natural process is ever perfectly regular, but steady enough that it becomes almost hypnotic. The sound of transformation, one drop at a time. The sound of matter being separated, purified, transformed by the application of heat and time and the careful design of the alchemical apparatus. You are transfixed. You cannot look away from the experiment. The drops continue to fall. Each one is collected in the receiving vessel below. As the drops accumulate, they form a small pool of liquid in the bottom of the vessel. The liquid is clear, or perhaps very slightly golden in color. Certainly, it is different from the muddy brown of the original mixture in the cucurbit. The color is changing inside the cucurbit as well. As the liquid evaporates, as the vapors are driven off, the composition of what remains changes. The liquid that was originally brownish is becoming darker, more concentrated. The non-volatile components, the elements that will not vaporize, no matter how hot they become, remain behind, accumulating, concentrating, becoming increasingly complex in their chemistry. The furnace breathes. The sand bath holds the vessels at the perfect temperature. The reaction continues. The bubbles rise. The vapor condenses. The drops fall. Drip, drip, drip. Time seems to lose meaning in this room. You are aware of the storm outside, of the rain and wind, but these seem distant, almost unreal compared to the reality of the experiment unfolding before you. The experiment is what is real. The distillation is what matters. The transformation of the crude, muddy brown liquid into something clear and refined and transformed. The alchemist sits back to watch. His work for now is complete. The apparatus is sealed. The heat is steady. The reaction is proceeding on its own, driven by the heat of the furnace and the carefully designed pathway of the glass vessels. He is patient. Alchemists must be patient. The work cannot be rushed. The transformation will take as long as it takes. To force it, to rush it, would be to destroy it. You watch with him. The drops continue to fall. The liquid in the receiving vessel continues to accumulate, and somewhere inside the sealed system of glass and clay lute, matter is being transformed. New compounds are being created from the old ones. Elements are being separated, concentrated, purified. The color of the liquid is changing more noticeably now. It was clear and golden when the drops first began to fall. But as more drops accumulate, as the concentration of the collected liquid increases, the color becomes richer, deeper. There is a quality to the light passing through the liquid that suggests depth, suggests complexity, suggests that something profound is happening at the molecular level. And the vapor continuing to rise and condense suggests that the process is far from complete. There is still much to evaporate from the mixture in the cucurbit, still much to drive upward through the tubes, still much to condense and collect in the receiving vessel. The bubbling continues. The droplets continue to fall. The furnace continues its steady burn. Outside, the storm continues its assault on the tower. And inside this circular chamber at the peak of the tower, time is marked not by clocks or bells, but by the rhythm of the distillation. Drip, 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 drip. The sound of transformation, the voice of alchemy, the patient, relentless process of matter being changed, refined, perfected through the application of heat and the design of glass, and the patience of one man who has chosen to dedicate his life to understanding the secrets hidden within the materials of the world. The drops continue to fall. Drip. And the liquid in the receiving vessel grows deeper in color. Drip, drip. The transformation continues. Drip. The furnace breathes. Drip, drip. The storm rages outside. Drip. But inside the tower, at the heart of the experiment, there is only the steady sound of the work proceeding, the voice of alchemy speaking through the medium of glass and fire and time. Drip, drip, drip. The bubbles rise through the liquid in the cucurbit, the vapor condenses, the liquid falls, the color deepens, the transformation unfolds. And you sit, watching, listening, as the seconds stretch into minutes, and the minutes into something that feels like the expansion of eternity itself, all contained within the boundaries of this circular tower chamber where a fire burns that has not gone out in weeks. The furnace breathes. Drip, 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 drip. The distillation has reached its crescendo now. The bubbling in the cucurbit is no longer a gentle susurration. It has become urgent, almost frantic. The heat from the sand bath has built to its peak temperature, and the liquid inside the sealed vessel is boiling with intensity. The bubbles form rapidly now, one after another, a constant stream of them rising through the liquid, colliding with one another, merging and separating and rising again toward the headspace of the vessel. Watch carefully. This is the true heart of the work. This is the moment where the beauty of the process reveals itself. The bubbles do not simply disappear into the vapor space. They burst against the surface of the liquid, and in that instant of bursting, something remarkable occurs. The vapor that has been contained within each bubble escapes into the atmosphere above the liquid, but it does so with force, with energy. This creates a gentle circulation within the vapor space. The hot, newly formed vapor rises toward the cooler regions near the top of the vessel and the glass tube. As it rises, it encounters the cooler glass, and this is where the transformation occurs. The heat dissipates. The molecular motion slows. The vapor loses its ability to remain gaseous. And so it condenses. But condensation is not instantaneous. It is a gradual process. The vapor first becomes supersaturated. More vapor is present than should theoretically be able to exist in the available space. This creates a state of instability. The vapor wants to become liquid. It is seeking any surface, any imperfection, any dust particle upon which to condense. The inside of the glass tube provides such surfaces. The molecules of glass itself, with their slight irregularities and imperfections, offer attachment points for the condensing vapor. And so, imperceptibly at first, a film of liquid begins to form on the inner walls of the tube. This film is so thin as to be nearly invisible, but it is there, and it grows, droplet by droplet, molecule by molecule. As the film grows thicker, gravity begins to assert its influence. The liquid on the inner wall of the tube becomes heavy enough to overcome the adhesive force that binds it to the glass. A rivulet forms. This rivulet flows downward, following the curve of the tube, gathering more condensed liquid as it descends, becoming thicker and faster as it moves toward the end of the tube. And then, at the very end of the tube, where it enters the receiving vessel, the rivulet collects. The liquid pools at this junction, accumulating, growing heavier, expanding in volume until the weight of it can no longer be supported by the adhesive force of the glass. And so it falls. Drip. One complete cycle, from boiling liquid to rising vapor to cooled and condensed liquid to fallen droplet. A cycle that is repeated thousands upon thousands of times during the course of this single distillation. Each cycle is identical in its fundamental nature, yet each is unique in its specific characteristics. The temperature fluctuates slightly. The rate of evaporation changes moment by moment. The cooling provided by the tower air is not perfectly consistent. And yet, from this apparent chaos emerges a profound order. The apparatus functions. The cycle repeats. The droplets fall. But this is not a cycle that exists only in isolation. It is part of a larger, more complex cycle. As the liquid falls from the tube into the receiving vessel, it does not simply sit there. The heat radiated from the sand bath is still being conducted through the glass of the receiving vessel. The liquid inside is still slightly warm. Some of what has just condensed will, in turn, evaporate again as the heat finds it. This is the genius of the alchemical apparatus. It is not a simple distillation that separates the crude from the refined in a single, straightforward process. Rather, it is a cycle that repeats, that builds upon itself, that purifies and refines with each iteration. The liquid that falls into the receiving vessel is more refined than what was in the cucurbit, but it is not perfectly refined. Some portion of it will evaporate again, rise again, condense again, and fall again into a secondary receiving vessel or back into the primary one. This fractional distillation, repeated over and over, gradually separates the components of the original mixture into their constituent parts. Like elements arrange themselves at different distances from the heat source, with the most volatile substances rising highest and condensing furthest from the furnace, while the less volatile substances condense closer to the source of heat. And in the receiving vessel, the liquid is changing. The color is shifting. You have noticed this already, but now, as you watch with complete focus, the change becomes undeniable. The liquid that was clear and pale golden when the distillation began is becoming deeper in color, but not in a uniform way. The color is not simply intensifying, becoming a deeper shade of gold. Instead, it is transforming, shifting, becoming something different entirely. This is what the ancient alchemists called the peacock's tail, the sequence of colors that appears during the distillation, the visual manifestation of the chemical transformation occurring within the apparatus. First comes the black. The liquid in the receiving vessel is still mostly clear, mostly pale, but there are now dark streaks within it. These are the heaviest components, the least volatile substances that have somehow made their way through the vapor and into the condensate. Perhaps they have been carried aloft as tiny liquid droplets suspended in the vapor, traveling through the tube and falling into the receiver. Or perhaps the distinction between liquid and vapor is not as clear-cut as we imagine, and some portion of the non-volatile material can exist in a kind of semi-gaseous state when heated sufficiently. Regardless of the mechanism, the result is visible. The streaks of darkness in the otherwise clear liquid are becoming more pronounced. The liquid is turning gray, then darker gray, and finally a deep, unmistakable black. This is the nigrido, the blackening, the first stage of the great work. In the classical alchemical texts, this stage represents putrefaction, decay, the breaking down of the crude material into its component parts. It is a stage of darkness, of dissolution, of the dissolution of the old to make way for the new. The black color grows more intense. The liquid in the receiving vessel is now nearly opaque, a dark, mysterious liquid that catches the light but does not transmit it. The color is so dark that it seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. Gazing into the vessel is like gazing into a pool of midnight. And then, almost imperceptibly, a change begins. The darkness does not lighten uniformly. Instead, at the very edges of the liquid where it is thinnest, the color begins to shift. The black becomes dark gray. The dark gray becomes lighter gray. And then, in a process that seems to take forever and yet happens in what is perhaps only a few moments, the color begins to shift again. This is the white, the albedo. The alchemists spoke of the whitening as a crucial stage in the work. The blackness, the darkness, the apparent destruction of the original material gives way to a clarity, a purity, a whiteness that represents the separation of the essence from the dross. The material is becoming purer, clearer, more refined. The transformation is visually stunning. As the color shifts from black to white, the liquid seems to transform from something heavy and inert into something light and dynamic. The opacity does not disappear entirely, but it changes in character. The liquid becomes milky, cloudy, like cream poured into water. The white color is not pure white, but rather an off-white, a pearlescent quality that suggests depth and complexity even in the apparent simplicity of the color. And the light begins to pass through it differently. Where the black liquid seemed to absorb all light, to give nothing back, the white liquid seems to dance with light, to scatter it, to create subtle gradations of brightness and shadow within its own substance. The albedo stage continues. The liquid becomes increasingly white, increasingly opaque, increasingly mysterious. The alchemist watches. He has seen this before many times, perhaps hundreds of times. And yet, each time it happens, there is a sense of wonder in his eyes. The albedo never becomes routine. The transformation from black to white never ceases to be miraculous. But the work is not yet complete. The great work has three stages: nigrido, albedo, and finally rubedo. The red. And then it happens. You see it beginning at the very edges of the white liquid, a subtle shift, a color that is not quite white and not quite the color you are about to see, a rose color, a pink, a pale red that seems almost to glow from within the white. The transformation accelerates. The white color is being overtaken, consumed, transformed into something warmer, something more vital, something that seems to contain within it the very essence of life and vitality and power. The red spreads. It begins at the edges and gradually moves inward, deepening, intensifying. The pale rose becomes a deeper pink. The pink becomes red. The red becomes a deep, rich crimson. It is not the red of blood, though it is not entirely unlike it. It is the red of garnets, of rubies, of the deepest fire. It is the red of transformation complete, of the base metal of the soul purified and elevated to its highest state. This is the rubedo, the reddening, the final stage. In the classical texts, the rubedo represents completion, perfection, the attainment of the philosopher's stone itself. Some say that the red liquid once produced is the key to all transformation, that a single drop of this liquid can transmute base metals into gold, can cure any disease, can grant immortality to those who drink it. The alchemist does not believe in the literal truth of these claims. He is a rational man, trained in observation and experiment, in the careful notation of results. And yet, he cannot entirely suppress the wonder that arises within him as he watches the liquid in the receiving vessel complete its transformation, from black to white to red. from apparent destruction to purification to completion, from the crude and base to the refined and noble. The distillation continues. More drops fall into the receiver. The red liquid deepens further, becomes more saturated, more intense. The color is now so deep that it is almost purple, almost maroon. It catches the candlelight and throws it back in a warm, almost living glow. And then, gradually, as the heat in the sand bath begins to diminish slightly, as the furnace's breath becomes less forceful, as the cycle of boiling and condensing and falling begins to slow, the intensity of the transformation diminishes. No new drops fall. The distillation has completed its course. The liquid that can be driven off has been driven off. What remains in the cucurbit is the non-volatile residue, the matter that will not vaporize, no matter how much heat is applied. The alchemist does not turn up the heat further. He does not try to force more from the process. The experiment is complete. The time has come to let it rest, to let the glass cool, to assess the results of the work. Outside, the storm has changed. The violent assault on the tower has diminished. The rain still falls, but it is no longer a lashing deluge. It is a steady, constant rain, the kind that will likely continue all night, but with less fury, less chaos than before. The wind still howls, but its voice is calmer now, less desperate, more accepting of its own nature. The only sounds in the tower are the sounds of the laboratory itself, the gentle crackle of the coals in the furnace, the soft hiss of the air being drawn upward through the chimney, and now something new. A scratching sound. The alchemist has taken up a quill. He sits at a small desk in one corner of the room, a desk that is covered with papers and inks and implements of writing. The light here is provided by several candles, arranged in a careful pattern to illuminate the paper without creating distracting shadows. He is writing. The scratching of the quill on paper is rhythmic, meditative. He writes quickly, his hand moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who has filled countless pages with notes and observations. But the speed does not diminish the care. Each letter is formed with precision. The words are legible, the lines are straight, the organization is clear. He is recording the results of the distillation. The manuscript in which he writes is bound in leather. The pages within are yellowed with age and previous writings. This is a record book, a laboratory notebook, a chronicle of experiments stretching back years, perhaps decades. Each page documents a different distillation, a different experiment, a different step in the great work. As he writes, he occasionally consults other texts. A large book, bound in dark cloth, lies open on the desk. This is a classical alchemical treatise, perhaps the work of Jabir ibn Hayyan or Roger Bacon or one of the other masters of the art. He refers to it for guidance, for the correct terminology, for the proper symbols to use in his record. And symbols are what fill most of the page. The alchemist is not simply writing words. He is drawing symbols, symbols for the planets, for the metals, for the processes themselves. A circle with a dot in the center represents the sun and gold. A crescent moon represents silver. A cross represents the union of opposing forces. Curved lines represent distillation and sublimation. Straight lines represent separation and analysis. To an untrained observer, the page would appear to be covered in mystical gibberish, in secret codes and hidden meanings. And in a sense, this is true. The symbols are a code, a method of concealing the precise details of the work from those who lack the proper education to understand them. Only another trained alchemist, educated in the symbolism and the tradition, could read these notes and understand what has been recorded. But the alchemist himself knows exactly what each symbol means. As he writes, he is translating the observations of the evening into the language of alchemy. The black color becomes the symbol for nigredo. The white color becomes the albedo symbol. The red becomes rubedo. The temperature at which the distillation began is represented by a symbol indicating the gentle heat of the sand bath. The duration of the process is noted by a system of marks and symbols that conveys the passage of time. Every detail is recorded, not because the details matter in some literal, practical sense. The alchemist will not need to consult these notes to repeat the experiment, as he knows the process by heart, but because the recording itself is a form of meditation, a form of reflection upon the work. By writing it down, by converting the experience into symbols and words, he is consolidating what he has learned, is fixing it in his memory, is creating a permanent record that might someday be useful to others or to himself when memory fails. The scratching continues. Page after page is filled. The alchemist's focus is complete. He has moved from the role of experimenter to the role of scholar. He is no longer observing the chemical transformation in the glass vessels. He is now engaged in the mental transformation, the recording and reflection and consolidation of what he has observed. And as he writes, as the only sound in the room becomes the gentle scratch of the quill and the steady crackle of the furnace, a profound calm descends over the laboratory. The urgency of the experiment is past. The danger is diminished. There is a sense of rightness, of completion, of a day's work done well. The hours pass. The alchemist fills page after page with his careful notations. The record of this night's work grows, and as it grows, the fire in the furnace is gradually allowed to diminish. The alchemist does not add new fuel. The coals are left to burn down slowly, their heat gradually dissipating into the cold stone of the furnace walls. The sand bath cools. The glass vessels, which were dangerously hot just hours ago, gradually return to a temperature that would be safe to touch. The liquid in the receiving vessel settles. The red color, which seemed to glow with inner fire when the glass was warm, becomes a deeper, darker red as it cools. It is no less beautiful, but it is different. The apparent internal luminosity fades as the glass cools, and the refractive properties of the warmed glass change back to its normal state. The alchemist finally sets down his quill. The record is complete. The notes are finished. He closes the leather-bound volume and sets it carefully aside on the desk. His hand is cramped from writing, his fingers stained with ink. He flexes his fingers and rotates his wrist, easing the tension. It is time now for the small experiment, the one that he allows himself every few weeks, though he knows intellectually that it is unlikely to succeed, though he has failed countless times before. It is time to attempt the transmutation. From a small wooden box, he removes a crucible, a small, heavy vessel made from clay that has been fired to an extreme hardness. Inside this crucible, he places a small piece of lead. The lead is soft, dull gray in color, heavy for its size. It is base metal, the very opposite of gold. Of all the metals, lead is perhaps the most associated with impurity, with baseness, with the crude and unrefined. Into the crucible with the lead, he places a small pinch of the red powder. This powder is not the liquid he has just distilled. Rather, it is a dried residue from a previous distillation, a precious substance that has taken weeks to accumulate, to concentrate, to purify. This is as close as he has come to the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that is said to be capable of transmuting base metals into gold. He knows the probability of success is infinitesimal. He knows that the lead will not turn to gold, and yet he cannot entirely suppress the hope that fills his chest as he carefully positions the crucible in a small depression carved into a brick, positioned directly in front of the furnace's opening. The heat from the furnace is still considerable, even though the fire has been allowed to burn down. The flames are lower than they were, but they are still present, still burning with a steady, hot intensity. The radiant heat from the coals and flames is enough to bring the crucible to a high temperature. The alchemist watches as the lead begins to soften. It does not melt. The temperature is not quite high enough for that, but it loses its rigid form, becomes plastic, becomes malleable. The surface begins to shimmer, and then, as the heat penetrates deeper into the lead, small droplets of molten metal form on its surface. These droplets merge, creating larger pools of liquid. The surface of the lead becomes mirror-like, reflecting the light of the furnace flames. The red powder, exposed to this heat, begins to change. It darkens. It seems to be absorbed into the molten lead. The moment of possibility is arriving. This is the instant when transformation might occur, when the base metal might be elevated to nobility, when the impossible might become real. The lead grows hotter. The flames of the furnace seem to reach toward it, as if drawn by the possibility of what might occur. The surface of the molten metal shimmers with colors. There are hints of redness there, hints of gold, hints of every possible color that might indicate successful transmutation. And then, slowly, inevitably, the moment passes. The lead does not transmute. It does not become gold. It cools, returning to its original gray color, its original base nature. The red powder has been absorbed into it, coloring it slightly, perhaps changing its properties in some subtle way. But it is still lead. It is still base metal. The great work has not been completed through this small experiment. The alchemist removes the crucible from the heat, using a long iron rod with a hook at the end to pull it back from the furnace opening. He sets it on a stone slab to cool. The lead inside will cool slowly, its atoms gradually losing their heat energy, settling back into their crystalline lattice, returning to the solid state. He does not look disappointed. He has done this experiment many times before. He knows the likely outcome. And yet, hope is a powerful thing. In his heart, in the deep places where reason does not reach, he has hoped that this time, this night, this particular combination of lead and red powder might somehow succeed, that this might be the moment when the work is crowned with success. It was not, but it will not prevent him from trying again. The work continues. The search for the stone continues. Each failure brings knowledge, even if the knowledge is only the negative knowledge of what does not work, of what combinations and proportions and temperatures do not produce the desired result. The crucible cools. The lab grows quieter. The furnace is now burning very gently, just enough to maintain the warmth that prevents the laboratory from becoming cold in the night. The coals glow a dull orange, still hot enough to be dangerous, still hot enough to burn, but no longer the bright, active fire of an hour ago. The alchemist moves about the laboratory, putting things away. The distillation apparatus is carefully disassembled. The glass vessels are gently removed from the sand bath. They are rinsed with water from a ceramic pitcher and dried carefully with linen cloths. The condensed red liquid from the receiving vessel is carefully poured into a small glass bottle, which is sealed with a glass stopper. This bottle is then placed on a shelf, joining dozens of other bottles containing the results of previous distillations. Each bottle holds a precious liquid or powder, each one the result of weeks of careful work. The sand in the sand bath is raked level. The sand will be reused for future distillations. It will be sifted to remove any solid particles that have fallen into it from the experiments, and then it will be ready to serve again. The notebooks are returned to their place on the desk. The quills are cleaned and set aside to dry. The ink bottle is sealed. The candles used for writing are extinguished, leaving only the flames in the furnace and the occasional candle elsewhere in the room to provide light. The laboratory is being returned to its resting state. And as this work continues, you find yourself looking around the room with new eyes, seeing it not just as a laboratory, but as something more. A sanctuary, a place of refuge from the chaotic world outside. The shelves that line the walls are filled with books, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Their spines are worn from frequent handling. Their pages are yellowed and brittle with age. These are the collected wisdom of the alchemical tradition, the accumulated knowledge of centuries of experiment and observation. There is the emerald tablet, the foundational text of Western alchemy. There are the works of Jabir ibn Hayyan, the great Arab alchemist. There are the notebooks of Roger Bacon and other medieval scholars. There are newer works, printed books from the last 100 years, representing the latest developments in alchemical theory and practice. Between and around the books are other collections, jars and bottles, each containing a specimen. Here is a piece of amber, cloudy and warm to the touch. There is a mineral specimen of great beauty, crystallized into geometric forms that seem to follow some deep mathematical principle. In another jar, something floats in a clear liquid, preserved for reasons that are unclear, but that surely made sense to someone at some point. There are astronomical charts on the walls, showing the positions of the planets and their relationships to one another. There is an astrological wheel, marked with symbols representing the houses and the zodiacal signs. There are anatomical drawings, showing the organs and tissues of the human body, suggesting that the alchemist sees a connection between the transformation of matter and the transformation of the flesh. All of this is the work of a mind that has spent decades, perhaps a lifetime, accumulating knowledge. Every book, every specimen, every drawing and chart is part of the effort to understand the fundamental nature of matter and transformation. This is not a laboratory of someone casually interested in alchemy as a hobby. This is the life's work of a dedicated scholar. And it is all contained within these stone walls, hidden away from the world, protected from the chaos and the ignorance that surrounds the tower. The world outside this laboratory does not understand what happens here. The common folk in the villages below, if they think of the tower at all, likely believe it to be haunted, or the residence of a sorcerer, or inhabited by some form of supernatural evil. The church has its suspicions about the work done here, views alchemy with distrust, sees it as dangerously close to sorcery and witchcraft. The educated scholars, those who do understand something of alchemy, are scattered across Europe and beyond, each isolated in their own tower or study, each pursuing their own version of the great work, each keeping their discoveries and methods close to their chest for fear of persecution or theft. But in this laboratory, for this one night at least, the work has been done, the experiments completed, the results recorded. The knowledge has been advanced, even if only by a small amount. The mysteries have been approached, even if they have not been fully solved. The fire in the furnace is banked now. The alchemist has added sand to the coals, partially smothering them, slowing their burn. The fire will smolder through the night, maintaining its heat, ready to be fanned back to activity in the morning when the day's work resumes. But for now, it is a gentle fire, a small fire, a fire that exists more as a presence than as an active force. And the alchemist is tired. He has worked for many hours. The distillation alone took several hours, and before that there was the grinding and the preparation and the careful sealing of the apparatus. His body is tired. His mind is tired. But it is a good tiredness, the kind that comes from work that matters, from effort that is directed toward a goal that is greater than the self. He moves to a chair positioned near the furnace. This chair has been worn smooth by decades of use. It has been positioned in exactly this spot for so long that the floor beneath it is worn away slightly, creating a hollow where the chair legs have rested day after day, year after year. He sits. The warmth from the furnace washes over him. It is comforting. It is the warmth of the creative fire, the warmth of the transformation that has been happening in the glass vessels all evening. He can still hear the gentle sound of the furnace, the sound of the coals settling, the soft hiss of air moving through the vents. His eyes begin to close. The rhythmic sound of the furnace is hypnotic, pulling him towards sleep. The warmth is comforting, wrapping around him like a blanket. The laboratory, which has been a place of intense activity and focus, is now becoming a place of rest and peace. His breathing slows. His body relaxes. The tension that has accumulated in his muscles throughout the day begins to dissipate, flowing out of him into the chair, into the stone floor, into the earth beneath the tower. The furnace continues its work. It will burn through the night. It will maintain the heat. It will be ready in the morning. But for now, it burns quietly, gently, as if deliberately attempting not to disturb the rest of the man who sits before it. The rain outside continues to fall, a steady, patient rain that will likely continue until dawn. The wind has almost entirely subsided now. The worst of the storm has passed. What remains is the aftermath, the gentle continuation of the wet weather, the settling of the storm's energy into a steady, rhythmic pattern. Inside the laboratory, all is quiet, all is still. The experiment is complete, the work is done, the knowledge has been recorded, the fire continues its eternal burn. And in the chair, the alchemist sleeps. His breathing becomes deeper, more regular. His face, lined with age and care, becomes peaceful. The mind that has been so active, so engaged, so focused on the details of the experiment is now released into the realm of dreams. The laboratory settles around him. The candles burn lower. The furnace maintains its steady heat. The glass vessels cool on their shelves, holding their precious contents, the results of the evening's work, the physical manifestation of the search for truth and transformation. The stone walls of the tower stand firm, protecting this sanctuary of knowledge. The storm rages outside, but it cannot penetrate these walls. The chaos of the world beyond cannot reach this place. Here there is only the work, and the rest that follows the work, and the eternal pursuit of understanding that drives the alchemist to return, again and again, to this laboratory, to this furnace, to this quest for the impossible. The furnace glows steadily through the night. The secrets of the laboratory remain safe within these stone walls. The experiment continues in its way, the processes of matter continuing their eternal transformation, the molecules continuing their dance, the mysteries continuing their slow revelation to those patient enough to listen. And as the night deepens, as the hours pass in silence and darkness broken only by the glow of the furnace, the laboratory settles into its rest. The work of today is complete. Tomorrow will bring new work, new experiments, new approaches to the great mysteries. But for now, there is only the warmth and the quiet and the knowledge that the search continues, that the work goes on, that the pursuit of the stone, the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of transformation will never end. Sleep well. The secrets are safe. The fire burns. The work continues in ways that do not require the conscious participation of the alchemist. The matter transforms. The elements dance. The mysteries slowly, patiently reveal themselves to those who have dedicated themselves to understanding. Sleep.